Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a good night. I am King Pigley. This is Gaming Imperfectly, and welcome to the channel. And if you're new to the channel, I am King Pigley, and I hope you like what you see. I got a true crime. We're jumping into a true crime story today, or at least a truly baffling mystery. And I would love to hear what you guys think of it. Stick around. This one is a head scratcher. Sean Williams, a conservation agent for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and his partner saw a truck. The truck was parked right off a trail called Sioux Hustler Trail in the Boundary Water area, or Boundary Water Canoe Area wilderness in Minnesota. They didn't think anything of it. In fact, they thought it was going to be fairly routine and that it was just somebody had parked in a place they didn't know they could park. And so their plan was to walk in there, probably find the dude camping, and then ask him to move his truck. However, when they went into the area, they really couldn't find anything. They looked, but they couldn't find a campsite. Anyway, fast forward a few months, the truck was still there. And this time, when they went in, they did discover a campsite, but it was under 2 to 4 foot of packed snow from being out there all winter long. When they first had found it, it was back in the winter, but now it was spring, and the snow had not melted yet. And they found the campsite, but it didn't look like anybody had been there, and the truck had been there long enough to have a huge amount of snow pile up on top of it. This raised concerns. What they found at this campsite is truly gruesome. Jordan Grider was a 29-year-old man from New Mexico. At a very early age, according to Jordan's mother, he had developed a love of being in the outdoors and really kind of grew up at that early age, like building his own ghillie suit when he was 12 and going out sneaking around in a ghillie suit. He just loved nature. He loved hunting. He loved camouflage. It was just one of those things. And as he got older, he actually developed the ideals of being a minimalist and living off-grid more and more. In fact, when he was 19 years old, he left home and then started to do just that. He lived in quite a few places, but he spent the majority of a decade living off-grid in New York, in upstate New York, and also here in Kentucky where I live, not too far from where I live actually, in a very small town called London. I don't live in London, but that's where Jordan had established a off-grid home base kind of thing. Now, he lived out in the woods, guys, but I'm not talking about, he wasn't a hobo living in a tent and stinking to high heaven. Jordan was a very hard-working guy. He believed in keeping himself well-groomed. He didn't just walk around stinking because he didn't have indoor plumbing and lived in a tent. He kept himself very well clean and shaved and kept a job. He was a hard-working guy. And in fact, he had even started working with local Mennonites, which are kind of like Amish light. Like, Mennonites can use electricity and stuff like that, to where certain really hardcore ordinands of Amish will not use electricity at all. Mennonites are not necessarily like that. And Jordan had worked out a great relationship with a few Mennonite families or communities, to where he would live on an acre of land and for work. He would work for them, he would build furniture for them, but he would live out in a tent on an acre of land for that, and on one of their properties. And it worked out well for him. But at 29 years old, there was still something outdoorsy that he hadn't done, and that was really spend the entire winter camping. Now, for you guys that don't do much camping, that might not sound like that big of a deal. But for those of you who are hikers and campers and spend a lot of time outdoors, then you do know that winter camping is extremely difficult. And not only is it difficult, but it can be absolutely fatal if you're not prepared properly. Jordan, though, felt that he was, and after 10 years of experience of living off-grid and camping outdoors and basically living outdoors, in fact, he did. He wasn't homeless. Even Jordan told his mother one time that, "I'm not homeless, I just choose to live outside." So that's his mentality. And so he felt really comfortable with winter camping, and he wanted to try it. The other side of it was Jordan hadn't lived at home with his mother or been around, and he'd been traveling. He was very nomadic. And so he decided it was kind of time to go home for a bit. The guy's pushing 30 years old. He's 29 at this point in time. And this is in 2018. So in 2018, Jordan leaves the East Coast and goes to Minnesota where his mother is now living, and that's where our story kind of picked up. He told his family that he was going to go live off-grid in the woods and winter camp for the winter in Minnesota. But this was not a concern to them. When he said that he was prepared, they just naturally assumed that Jordan was prepared because he had been living off-grid for over a decade. And so why would you assume that this guy wasn't going to be okay? And so they were like, okay, we'll see you, Jordan. And Jordan got his supplies together and everything else. We know that Jordan was still alive because there is actually financial receipts of him purchasing food and stores and stuff like that to take with him out in the Boundary Water Canoe Area wilderness in Minnesota. From what we understand is that once he got out there, he set up camp where then our story picked up with Sean Williams and his partner coming across it. They had to wait. All right, Sean Williams and the other conservation agent, when they discovered, originally discovered Jordan's truck and went looking for his campsite and really couldn't find it. When they did find it, they had to wait. Even though it looked like nobody was there, like I said, it was under 2 to 4 feet of snow. And so finally, in April and May of 2019, the weather had melted and permitted enough for them to start searching the camp. And like I said, what they found was gruesome. There was blood everywhere, guys. This place was pretty saturated with it. And also what struck Conservation Agent Williams, Sean Williams, so strangely about this is that they knew now that this was Jordan Greider's campsite because his ID was there and stuff like that. What was weird about this is that once they started looking into who Jordan Greider was and the experience he had in the outdoors, what struck the conservation agent as strange is how ill-prepared this camp was. His sleeping area was no more than a tarp over one rope and a hammock inside the tarp. I mean, it wasn't much of a shelter at all. And guys, it gets bitterly, brutally cold in Minnesota. I mean, I am talking about frigid temperatures, below zero temperatures and pouring snow. And this guy had set up a hammock and a tarp over the top of it. That really struck Conservation Agent Williams as super strange. Also, there wasn't much food at all, and there was nowhere to prepare it. Like, according to Jordan's family, he had talked about how he had become an expert at a rocket stove, which is an extreme way of making a lot of heat in a very primitive way when you're camping outdoors and stuff. And rocket stoves do produce a tremendous amount of heat. So when they were asking him, Jordan, how do you plan to deal with being so cold camping in the winter in Minnesota? He's like, oh, I'm a rocket stove expert. But there was no rocket stove of any kind found at this campsite. They did find that he had a 9mm pistol that was fully loaded, and no shots. There had been no shell casings or anything else shown up. But there was blood everywhere. And as they started really looking into it, inside his little lean-to area with his hammock, the hammock was saturated with blood. The walls of the tarp and on the inside of the tent were spattered with blood. And the remains that they finally found only included 12 human bones. Now, initially they found tons of bones, which is really odd in itself. But out of all the bones that they found, 12 belong to Jordan. They found a few vertebrae, a fibia, maybe a tibia as well, his femur. According to the reports, they never found his skull, and they were spread out. They weren't all just inside the hammock, although some were inside the hammock. This is so odd, guys, that they really, when they first started looking at it, they noticed all of a sudden after calling the sheriff's department and everything else, just the amount of blood everywhere was just insane. I mean, I'm talking about the whole campsite was covered in blood. But predominantly the largest amount was on the hammock. Like, the hammock was completely soaked. They immediately started suspecting foul play, but after investigating, they found no signs of foul play whatsoever. On top of this, what started making it even weirder is that there were lots of wolf tracks around. Wolf scat, wolf tracks, wolf fur, all that stuff. But the weird thing about it is that there doesn't seem to be a kill site. You know what I mean? Though it doesn't appear that wolves ate Jordan. All right. And then they also found all of his like not just a 9mm pistol, but tons of blades, knives, hatchets, and stuff like that. And like most outdoorsmen, including myself, guys, I keep a very sharp knife. Okay, I always joke that you could shave the hair off a fly's butt with my knives because I do spend quite a bit of time sharpening my axes and my knives because I use them. They're tools to me. And if you live an outdoor homesteading lifestyle, having a sharp axe or having a sharp knife is paramount. You have to. So it's not odd that all his knives were razor sharp, but it did add or lend to the question of, did Jordan accidentally cut himself in some way, shape, or form and bleed to death? So all these things are running through the investigators' minds, but Jordan's mother is convinced to this day that wolves got Jordan. She says most likely that night, his first night there, he was killed by wolves. This is kind of backed up between all the scat and the debris left by the wolves, the fur and the footprints. However, where this stopped being probable is that it supposedly occurred on his very first night out in the wilderness. And that does not bode well for the wolves ate Jordan theory. And I'll tell you why. A local professor in Minnesota at the local university who actually is an expert on wolves and their behaviors came forward. Now, this guy has a PhD, guys, in wolves. You know, this is his area of speciality. Came in and said 100% that there has not been a record of a fatal wolf attack in North America in over 200 years. There have only been 2 recorded wolf attacks in recent times, and in both cases, those wolves were starving to death, had rabies. There was something terribly wrong with that animal that caused this wolf to attack a human being. The truth behind wolves is that they don't even want anything to do with human beings. We almost eradicated wolves from North America. We almost hunted them to extinction. And because of that great extermination, wolves have absolutely developed an instinctual want to stay far away from human beings. If, by some chance, even if there was something horribly wrong with these wolves and they were against their nature, deciding it was a good idea to prey on Jordan Grider, here's the problem with this that the PhD also said. Wolves, when they hunt, the first thing they do when they find prey is they watch it for an extended period of time. Sometimes days, sometimes weeks. Just learning the patterns and the movements of these animals, like caribou, right? Then they plan as best as they can amongst the pack a coordinated way to take down that prey that will spend the least energy and pose the least threat to the pack, to the members of the pack. For Jordan to be out there one night and all of a sudden a pack of wolves attack him is pretty far-fetched. But the evidence really doesn't point that way. The other side of it is suicide. The police did investigate whether Jordan might have killed himself. But there is zero evidence of this. Jordan was not a depressed person. He wasn't on medication. He wasn't in therapy. He had never displayed any type of depressing behavior before. He actually loved life and being out in nature. He was a go-getter kind of guy, and suicide was probably the furthest thing from his mind. Also, right before he went camping, he was texting his family talking about, when I come into town next time, we're going to get together and have dinner and this, that, and the other. And there were no warning sign text to any other friend or family member asking for help or anything dark. There was none of that. So the idea that he killed himself is pretty slim as well. But then it comes to did he accidentally hurt himself on one of his weapons or on his sharp tool? You know, did he cut himself and then bleed to death? Well, here's the problem I have with this. Being an outdoorsman myself and working outdoors, like I cut down trees with a chainsaw. A lot of times when I'm putting up firewood for my family and stuff, I'm out in the woods by myself. There's nobody around. Now, I take tremendous amount of precautions when I'm out there by myself because I know something bad could happen to me. One, I let people know where I'm going to be. Jordan did not let people know where he was going to be. In fact, his campsite, according to Conservation Sean Williams, his campsite was extremely hard to find, and if Jordan was looking to get away from people, he did a great job by putting his campsite where he did because it was remote. Two, though, when you're outdoors and there's potential that you're working with heavy or sharp equipment, You take precautions to limit the chances that you're going to be hurt, but even if you are, for instance, if I'm out in the woods and I cut myself with a chainsaw or an axe, my first instinct, guys, is to put pressure on the wound to stop the blood flow. If I can't, I will take off my belt and make a tourniquet to stop the blood flow. But regardless of how I try to stop the blood flow and whether I'm successful or not, I am still then going to try to make my way, while applying pressure to the wound wherever it may be, I am going to try to make my way to my vehicle or to help. Jordan didn't do that. From all accounts, it looked like Jordan died in his hammock. Maybe a blood loss. So then that kind of does point to maybe Jordan tried to kill himself. So he cut himself and then just laid down in his hammock and bled to death? I don't know. More mysteries abound with the fact that, yes, there was predation by wolves, but his remains were scattered and none of his stuff was ever found. I mean, his equipment was all there. His gear was all there, but also he was so undersupplied for being out in the winter and winter camping. And this guy had 10 years of living outdoor experience. So why was he so undersupplied? Like, what was he thinking? I know this is kind of a short one, but, that's it for Jordan Grider's story. If you're going out into the wilderness areas of North America or anywhere else in the world, I don't care if it's the bush of Australia or the Black Forest in Germany, guys, go prepared. Take food, take water, take a little backpack full of stuff, take a signaling mirror, take extra stuff in case you get cold, and take a GPS locator. They're cheap, they're inexpensive. Buy one, take one with you. What's the harm? It's better to be safe than sorry. But that's it for King Piggly today, guys. That's all I got for you. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this video, please smash in the like button. It helps me out. And also, if you're new to the channel and you've been here this long, I surely hope you'll smash in that subscribe button. Keep coming back. And no matter what, hit the bell, guys. Get the notifications. That way you don't miss out on the next dark, strange, true story, crime, all these things that I bring to the channel. But that's it for King Piggly. I'm out of here. And I will see you guys in the next video.